In the quiet corners of life, where memories gather like autumn leaves, there exists a profound truth that many discover too late. Your value isn't measured by what you give to others, but by the love you finally learn to give yourself. This realization often comes when the house grows silent, when the phone stops ringing, when the years have etched their wisdom into your face. If you're joining us today on Elderly Active Life, we invite you to pause, reflect, and perhaps recognize yourself in this story of renewal. If this resonates with you already, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for daily content that celebrates the richness of your golden years. Now let's begin our journey together. 1. When everything changes. Eleanor was 65 when her world quietly collapsed around her. After decades of sacrifice, she found herself alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Portland. No retirement fund, no savings account with comfortable numbers, and most painfully, no place in the life of her daughter, the one person she had given everything for. To passers-by, Eleanor was just another older woman living alone, quiet, unassuming, invisible. But beneath that gentle exterior was a lifetime of love, heartbreak, and remarkable resilience. She had raised a child through difficult years, buried her husband Robert after a sudden workplace accident, worked her hands raw at countless jobs, and still ended up with little more than a roof over her head and a heart heavy with silence. For years, Eleanor believed that aging meant gradually disappearing from the world's notice, that if she wasn't useful to others, she wasn't worthy of attention. She measured her worth by what she could provide, not by who she was. But what Eleanor would eventually discover, what she would come to embody, is that there is something profoundly powerful in starting over, even in life's later chapters. 2. The loss that changes everything. Eleanor had always imagined her retirement years would bring tranquility. She pictured evenings on her porch with Robert, watching the sunset paint the Oregon sky in watercolors. She imagined Sunday gatherings with her daughter and perhaps grandchildren filling her modest home with laughter. That was the future she had held close to her heart, simple, warm, and rich with connection. But life rarely follows the paths we carefully map out for ourselves. The day Robert died was unseasonably cold. A gray mist had settled over the city by mid-morning. Robert had left before dawn, as was his routine, kissing her forehead and pouring coffee into his thermos with a casual, "Don't wait up, Ellie." She never did, but that day she would have given anything to have waited. The call came just after noon, a site supervisor with a heavy voice explaining there had been an accident, a structural failure. Robert was gone before help arrived. At first, Eleanor didn't cry. Her hands trembled, but her eyes remained dry. She hung up the phone and returned to the kitchen, where a pot of beef stew simmered on the stove. She turned off the burner, sat at the table, and stared at the floor for what felt like hours. 3. The sacrifice of everything. Eleanor's daughter, Jessica, had always been ambitious, even when she wasn't sure where to direct that energy. After high school, her test scores weren't sufficient for scholarships, and they couldn't afford tuition on their own. She was restless, full of dreams, determined to escape their small corner of the world. "I want to move to Chicago," she told Eleanor one morning and over breakfast. "There are opportunities there, good jobs. I can make real money, Mom." Eleanor's heart sank, but she nodded. How could she be the one to clip her daughter's wings? Before Jessica left, Eleanor gave her $1,000 in cash, money saved over months by cutting every possible corner. "Just for emergencies," she said. "Don't touch it unless you need to." Jessica hugged her tightly, kissed her cheek, and promised to call every Sunday. At first, she did. The calls came reliably. Jessica described the city's energy, how different everything felt from home. She mentioned working at an auto repair shop, starting with basic tasks but impressing her manager. Then one Sunday, the tone shifted. Jessica sounded hesitant, nervous. "Mom," she said, "can I ask you something?" She explained that rent was consuming her income, $1,000 monthly for a tiny studio apartment. "That's $12,000 a year just disappearing," she said. It felt like throwing money away. Then came the request. With a little help for a down payment, she could buy a small place. She'd found the perfect unit, and the bank would approve her loan with assistance. She was thinking about the money from Dad's accident settlement. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. That $40,000 had remained untouched for nearly 2 years. A sacred trust, Robert's final provision, her safety net if everything else collapsed. Still, Jessica's voice was soft with hope. "It's for us, Mom. For you too. One day I'll bring you to Chicago. We'll share the apartment when I'm making enough. You won't have to worry anymore." Eleanor needed to believe her, so she said yes. 4. The invisible mother. Time has a way of thinning even the strongest bonds when effort becomes one-sided. For Eleanor, the distance between herself and Jessica grew quietly, like dust gathering in forgotten corners. The weekly calls became bi-weekly, then monthly, then unpredictable. Eventually, they came only when Eleanor initiated them, and even then, they felt rushed, distracted. Eleanor never complained. She told herself Jessica was busy building her new life, overwhelmed with work and responsibilities. But she felt the growing silence, the widening space, the slow unraveling of their connection. Still, she sent care packages, homemade cookies, warm socks, letters with small bills tucked inside. She added notes with each one: "Stay warm," or "Don't forget to eat," or "Love you always." Jessica rarely acknowledged them, but Eleanor clung to the hope that somewhere inside, her daughter still felt her love, even if she couldn't express it. Then came the wedding invitation, not through a phone call, not from Jessica, but delivered to Eleanor's neighbor by mistake. "I think this was meant for you," Diane said with an awkward smile. "Congratulations." Eleanor stared at the elegant envelope. Her hands suddenly felt heavy. Inside was an invitation with gold borders and elegant script. Jessica was getting married in 2 weeks, in Chicago. She hadn't called, hadn't mentioned it, not even a text. For 3 days, Eleanor said nothing to anyone. She placed the invitation beside the photo of Jessica she kept on her nightstand and stared at it each night, wondering, was I not meant to know? Or did she simply forget that I might want to be there? 5. The turning point. For days after the painful phone call with her daughter-in-law, Eleanor barely spoke to anyone. She didn't cry or pace or shout. She simply stopped. Stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Stopped planning packages she might never send. Stopped checking the mailbox for letters that wouldn't arrive. Instead, she began looking around her apartment, seeing not what was in it, but what was missing. Robert was gone. Jessica was gone. The laughter, the warmth, the shared meals, the holidays, the quiet joy of a life connected to others, all gone. The apartment had grown heavy with silence. Every creaking floorboard and ticking clock seemed to echo louder than words. Then one morning, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It came as a simple ache in her hip as she bent to water her small collection of houseplants. A familiar pain, but one that whispered a question. If not now, when? She straightened slowly, looked out her window at the city beyond, and whispered, "What am I still waiting for?" No answer came, but she already knew it. Nothing. No one. That afternoon, she opened a fresh notebook and began to write. She listed what she owned, what she could sell, and what she needed. She researched apartments in walkable neighborhoods with libraries, parks, and community centers. Places with people. It wasn't about running away. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even about loneliness. It was about something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to name in decades: self-respect. She had always believed that motherhood meant sacrificing without expectation of return, and perhaps in many ways that was true. But now she was more than just someone's mother. She was still a woman, a complete person, and that person deserved peace. If you've been finding value in this journey, please take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing to Elderly Active Life for daily content that supports your well-being and independence. We're here with you every step of the way. 6. The rebirth. Eleanor's new apartment wasn't extravagant, a one-bedroom unit in a modest brick building near downtown. The walls were thin, and the kitchen barely fit 2 people. But it had something her old place lacked: sunlight that didn't hurt to stand in, silence that comforted rather than accused. Her neighbors were kind, mostly retired like herself. They nodded in hallways and held doors open. she appreciated these small courtesies. She found part-time work at the local community center, helping organize morning activities. It wasn't glamorous and paid just enough for groceries and utilities, but the work gave her something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. She would wake before sunrise, prepare for the day with care, and walk the 3 blocks to the center. She'd greet the regulars by name, arrange chairs for the morning Tai Chi class, and sometimes join in when her hip wasn't troubling her. Her days found a gentle rhythm: grocery shopping on Tuesdays, laundry on Thursdays, writing in her journal on Sunday afternoons. She no longer sent anything to Jessica. No more money, no more care packages, no more voicemails she wasn't sure would ever be heard. At first, that silence felt strange, but gradually it began to feel like strength. She started growing herbs in small pots by her window. She hung wind chimes outside her door. She bought herself fresh flowers every Friday. These small acts of self-care became sacred rituals, ways of saying to herself, "You matter." Occasionally, she would see a mother walking with her adult daughter and feel a familiar ache in her chest. Love never truly disappears, not real love, but she no longer allowed it to define her entire existence. She had done her part. She had given all she could, and now it was her turn. One evening, as she sat with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the streetlights come on through her curtains, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the peace that comes from being cared for by others, but the peace that comes from knowing you can care for yourself. "I'm still here," she whispered to the quiet room, "and that's enough." And that was the truth. She had no pension. She had no substantial savings. She had no child waiting to help her through old age. But she had herself, her steady hands, her sharp mind, her quiet dignity, her new life. And in that, she had everything she needed. If you're finding this story meaningful, we'd love for you to join our community at Elderly Active Life. Hit the subscribe button for daily content that celebrates the wisdom and strength of your journey. You are not alone. Eleanor's story isn't unusual. It's quiet, it's common, and that's precisely what makes it so powerful. Too many people, especially women, after giving their entire lives to others, raising children, supporting partners, holding families together, find themselves overlooked, forgotten, left to navigate the years they were told would be peaceful. But Eleanor chose differently. She chose herself. And in doing so, she reminds us of a truth we don't hear often enough: that even without a pension, without savings, without someone to lean on, you still have worth. You still matter. You still deserve peace. So if you're watching right now, perhaps sitting alone with a cup of tea, perhaps feeling like the world has moved on without you, please remember this: you are not invisible. You are not broken. You are not a burden. You are a person with stories, with wisdom, with strength, and it's never too late to choose your own life on your terms. You are not alone, and you never were. Thank you for joining us today on Elderly Active Life. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear these words. We're here with new content every day, supporting you in living your most fulfilling, independent life. Until tomorrow, remember that your journey continues, and every new day brings fresh opportunities to choose yourself.